Good morning. Thanks for inviting us. It's really good to see organizations like YEAR. Some of you I've seen before, actually. I see familiar faces, so it's a pleasure to be back. I don't know where the cut-off date for young is, but anyway, I don't know if I should feel honored or embarrassed by being invited here by young researchers, but anyway. Let me go into the heart of the topic. It's really important that organizations like Young exist, and that you take care of the topics you were just mentioning. And I can only encourage you as policymaker, but also as someone who has spent 20 years in academia to keep up with this. When I did my PhD, or my PhD was finished, these things did not exist, these European networks, and it's really interesting to see that it exists, and you should take the maximum benefit out of it. And in that respect, I'm pleased that Foster, which is a program which is European money, meaning taxpayers' money, is sponsoring this, because it's well invested money. So I was asked by YEAR. And as Alexis said, we had a few intense contacts with you the last couple of months. So to tell you a little bit, where are we with our work on Science 2.0? Where do we think it will go, and what are the policy initiatives that follows? So I will briefly speak about the results of the consultation, which you were so keen to help us for finding the answers, at least at your level, and then I will tell you what I can tell you about what are the policies that we will develop on open science in the future. So my unit is responsible. So for the whole field of open science policy, so including open access, open data, text and data mining, copyright, privacy, all these things, they are done by my unit, and the people there are the lead persons, all ex-researchers, academics. So it's good to have them on board, because they know the field. So we are doing these things, we are planning these things, and as I said to the organizer, I have to go back this afternoon. So if you have questions for the Brussels jungle, please don't wait until tomorrow or tonight. I will not be at the island to answer them. So answer them before the coffee break of the afternoon, because then I have gone. Because, by the way, we have 8 Nobel Prize winners visiting us on Wednesday. And we have to prepare that a bit. You know, everyone is equal, but some are more equal. So, yeah, for those who did literature, this is Orwell. Okay, so open science, this is our thing. We started working on it 3-4 years ago. I personally started working on it 5-6 years ago. But in Brussels, we were launching a series of work on it. We see it as a systemic change in the modus operandi of science and research. So systemic is very important. It's a system change. It's not an instrumental or a functional change. It's a system change, and it affects the whole life cycle and its stakeholders. So this is my preferred slide when I have to convince in Brussels people or in ministries or policymakers that they don't. When I have to convince them about the depth of the change. So if you take the green. If you take this is the classical cycle of research. You have your question, you gather your data, you do your analysis, you publicize it, and you make it a publication. It gets reviewed, and it starts back. Normally, this takes ages. It's all very closed. It's a closed system. It's a premium system. And what we started observing is that at every level of the research life cycle, you saw new ways of doing things, and you can synthesize them in one phase. Instead of being closed, it becomes open. So it is you can find your research question by going into blogs, by going into not open annotation, but by using Facebooks of research like Mendeley and ResearchGate. The data gathering is much more easy because of open data, but also because of the fact that there is a lot of, the whole move towards data-driven science, which is actually an enormous opportunity for all sciences, and in particular the social sciences, because, as I said to someone of you before, last week I had a big meeting with the Academy of Social Sciences, so that's a federating academies of all the social scientists in Europe. And and strangely enough, there is a little bit of skepticism there, and I started saying, but do you realize the opportunity, the digitization of science and also the digitization of life offers for social scientists? Because you can actually now, given the fact that everything is an internet, everything is a data point, social reality becomes as measurable as physical reality. So in MIT, there is a guy who wrote a book, Social Physics. So the idea is that the social reality is as measurable and as traceable as the physical reality. And that's only possible now. It was never the case before. So there are enormous opportunities there for the whole field, including the social scientists. Anyway, so you see all this happening, the blue dots. In one phrase, it is opening up the system into a much more bottom-up, data-driven, collaborative mode and an open mode. Open science, by result, is much more than only open access. It's much more than only open data. It is the whole thing, hence the systemic change. And what really started in Brussels, to convince the policymakers that we have to take it serious, is what you see happening is all these initiatives around it. So it's no longer some geek sitting somewhere in an office to try to invent open access. That it is really an open. It is a system of services, profit, not for profit, companies, NGOs, what have you. So what we call the emerging ecosystem of services and standards on open science, and that means it is no longer something hanging in the air. It means that it is something deep, it is something very serious, and it is something irreversible. So that's our view. You break up the system as it is. It offers a lot of opportunities. It also offers a few problems, and it is something very real and something very in amplitude enormous. If you only look at the popularity of what we call the Facebooks of scientists, it's enormous. ResearchGate is 3 million, Mendeley is 2.6 million, academia, Edu is close to 8 million people who use the site. Okay, not all at the same level, but still it is there. So this is something that has grown exponentially very quickly the last couple of years. So we have something there to be taken serious. And the main driver for what we did in Brussels, for what we do in Brussels, is we don't want Europe to lose this. We don't want Europe to miss the boat, very simply. Okay, so it is irreversible. Probably all of you are thinking that, but I have to repeat it over and over again. I can guarantee you that not everyone in the academic or in the stakeholder community think it is irreversible. So it is irreversible because why? You have the digital technologies making it possible. You have exponential growth of data, hence data-driven science. I just explained it. You have the globalization and the growth of the science community. It is. We are now, what is it, close to 8 million researchers, 20 million researchers worldwide, which is a tripling since the last 4 decades. So it simply is much more offer for research and much more demand for research careers than there was before. And it will only increase if you look at the demographics and if you look at how the bricks are coming up. It is something that is also a result of open science because of the pressure on the science system to be faster with grand challenges. I look at Ebola. There has been a lot of comments and discussions about that we could have been quicker in with our responses if the data would have been open so that the testing could have been quicker. Just as an example, there is much more pressure from the citizens or civil society to be part of the scientific system, and that is, we discussed it I think last night with a beer, that if we want the public authorities to invest 3% of GDP in science and research, meaning in your business, which is a lot of money, by the way, you cannot avoid that people, policymakers and citizens want you to be accountable. So it's logical, it's a huge amount of money, so the best way to show that what you do is well invested is just put it in the open and be transparent. So there's quite a significant pressure there. And there is much more demand, as I said, for accountability. And then the thing which is often overlooked by people who are not young researchers, but older researchers or older policymakers, is that sharing is an habit. And certainly the generation after you have been raised by Facebook. For them, sharing sharing experiences, sharing data, sharing contacts is much more natural than I was, for example, trained there. Your data, if you found data because of the fact that they were so scarce, you sit on it, you don't share it at all, you do your research, and after 4 years you publish your PhD. So that's a little bit a paradigm shift as well. Okay, so it's irreversible. It's also part of a larger trend. What is happening in science is not something that is happening in isolation. It is, if you look at open source, which is already there for 20, 25 years and functioning very well, it demonstrates you that an open approach can also be as efficient as a closed or a premium approach. You have the same in open innovation. You have collaborative knowledge platforms in private industry as well. The success of Creative Commons is there. The success of what they call now the sharing collaborative economy, Airbnb, Uber. Well, some might not like it, but the trend is irreversible. It's exactly the same logic behind it. You share unused resources, and by doing that, you make much more value out of it. And that's actually, in economic terms, what is happening. So you have MOOCs. Okay, the whole discussion is I know it is not all of them are that popular. How it will be, it doesn't matter. But the trend is there. Web 2 and so forth. So let me not go into the details, but it's important that people understand, in particular those not so young anymore, that it is not happening that it is not reversible, and that it is not happening in isolation. So, and it offers great opportunities. That's actually where it is all about. So open science is better value for money, because what you invested, you reuse it, and by doing so, you can get more out of it. Or by making it transparent, you will quickly find the errors or the mistakes, so make the results better. And as a result, you get a science system which is faster, which is more efficient, which is more faster in terms of finding solutions, and not faster in terms of having to write more proposals, but faster in terms of because I know that debate as well. So it's more efficient, it's faster, it's more reliable, and it is more responsive. So it's not perfect. There are drawbacks, but that's the law of statistics. If there are more people doing research, well, then you have more fraud, open or not. It's as simple as that. So it's not that dramatic, because every time we do this explanation, we have someone say, did you read that article in The Economist about fraud in open science? And then so they detected, someone somewhere did an overview. 2,700 articles were fraud last year in 2014. Now, on a total production of 20 million articles per year, what I'm saying, 2 million published articles per year, this is statistically simply insignificant. Okay, it's better it shouldn't happen, but statistically speaking, it's logical. If you have an enormous volume of articles, you have much more fraud. The perfect world doesn't exist, and not even in research, as you know. So that's not so. I think that's not the key issue. So all of that led us to organize this consultation, to which YEAR indeed contributed a lot to assess the degree of awareness of open science, because as you can imagine, when we started pushing this subject inside the bureaucracy in Brussels, not everyone was so convinced that it was important than I and my colleagues were. So we had to do a little bit of preaching there. Say, you know what, we do a consultation. So we started that. We did it last year from the summer, during the whole summer period. We got, given the fact that it was over the summer, an enormous amount, in our view, an enormous amount of responses, because every single response is much more than one person. If YEAR responds, it is the whole year behind you that is counted. If Leru answers with one submission, it is actually 27 universities answering. Idem dito for YEAR-AC2015 and so on. So the nominal amount is much lesser than, of course, than what is really behind it. And so we get a good response rate, and that allowed us to answer a few questions about how is open science perceived in Europe as an issue. How do the main stakeholders, so researchers, publishers, universities, researchers, how do they view it? How do they see the opportunities and the challenges, and what do they see as potential policy implications? So the last question was, do you think in that consultation, do you think Science 2.0, because that's how we called it, is a good term? And if not, what do you prefer? Well, you see the results. So 43% of the responses prefer open science. So from then on, we call it open science, although I preferred Science 2.0 because it marks the difference, like Web 2 and the internet. Well, Science 2 is a paradigm shift, systemic shift. But anyway, I lost my bottles of champagne here, so unfortunately, but that's okay. So do you recognize the analysis? So we distributed this paper with our analysis. This is what is going on, a little bit what I just told you. So 87% was agreeing with our analysis, 70% yes, 17% yes, but overwhelmingly the analysis was seen by the stakeholders as the right analysis. In other words, the stakeholders in Europe, and that's important for policymakers, I know this is not your core business, but that's important to be able to say that there is a sharing, that there is a platform for moving ahead, because it means everyone is detecting the problem at the same intensity. What are the key drivers? So what is driving it? This is more or less, if you look at the left-hand side, these are the drivers I quickly went over when I gave you the circle. If you count the light blue and the dark blue, because this is yes and this is yes, but you see that most of the drivers, ICTs, new ways of disseminating your output, researchers looking for new ways of collaboration. You see that all of this is heavily supported by the consultation. So it means that there is a significant, much more than a very significant amount of stakeholders agreeing with the fact that this is what drives actually the system to change, and that's why it is irreversible. Interesting enough, although it is still quite significant, 44%, what a lot of people think that is a main driver, at least 2 years ago, that citizens are pushing for the system to be part for them also as a scientist, is the least important driver. Now you have, of course, to take into account here, it is you who answers the question. If you would answer this to the citizens organization, you would probably have much more percentage there. So there is a little bit of a distortion there. So, but it doesn't matter. In a certain sense, it still is quite significant. Idem dito, if you look at, so up till now, the analysis is pertinent, the drivers are there, so it is what causes the change. And then we come, and you mentioned it in your speech, in your introduction, Alexis, then you come, what are the barriers actually for open science? If we all agree it is there to change, and then probably you, in this room it's 100% agreement on that. So what is actually then the barrier? How does it come? It doesn't go faster, although it goes very fast in my view, but I can come back to that later on. Well, that is interesting for us as policymakers, because the main barrier is there, of course, seen by all stakeholders. Will the quality of an open science system be the same as before? And there comes in the whole discussion about fraud and peer reviewing. If you go for open or preprint peer reviewing, which is an enormous successful, we discussed it last night with all the preprint repositories that you have, which is really taking off, close to 2 million articles there. Does that guarantee you the same quality? Post-publication review, does that guarantee you the same quality? If you diminish the role of the high impact journals, will it guarantee you the same output in terms of quality of the system? Between brackets, assuming that before the system was perfect, of course, but that's another discussion. So that's important. That's really important for us to look at, and that's where a lot of the discussion on altmetrics is something we take serious. We are looking into alternative metrics as not a substitute, but a complementary way of looking at how to guarantee the quality output of the system. But that, if you want, we can come back to that later on. Secondly, and that's very important for you, ladies and gentlemen, is of course that all of the researchers, and in all the workshops we did afterwards, is that from your personal point of view, the main problem perceived was the lack of incentives for doing open science career-wise. Full stop. If it is not gratified that you publish your data openly in some way or another for your career, and that can be several things. It can be an extra grant, it can be an appointment, it can be what have you. Then, of course, you have an enormous bottleneck, and that is why Foster is so important. If you I personally don't believe in a system where you formalize the incentives. The main incentive for open science should be that it shows you that you can do better research than before in a different way and in a better way, and in a richer way. If on top of it you can be gratified for that career-wise, all the better, but not the other way around. So, and that's why Foster and what you're doing here is really important. The issue of incentives, and the Royal Society has done a lot of workshops on it in UK recently on the same topic, and the issue of incentivizing researchers, research organizations, stakeholders, publishers to do open science is enormously important. And then the third thing is and that's for us also very important, is the lack of integration of existing infrastructure. This is the whole issue, of course, of data hosting and the lack of interoperability between data hosting. And that's quite logical. If all science becomes data-driven, the growth of data is exponential. The vice president referred to it. Okay, fine, fantastic, but where will you host it? Where will you access it? Where will you get the services to mine it? And how will you govern it? So that for us, that came back in the discussions over and over again. And so, as I will say at the end, this is an important point for our policies of the future. So there you see it, the incentives, quality, and the whole issue of let's say, infrastructure layer of open science, to put it in a simple way, were the three key issues coming out of the consultation as important points for the future. Implications, I said enough about it. It will be more reliable, more efficient. It will have faster and wider innovation. So these were all things that very much we used a lot to convince our top guys, punto, to take it quite serious. So that in Brussels. So it's that was important to see as well. What are the key issues you see for policy intervention? Well, it's quite logical. Already, what is ongoing? Open access to publications and open access to data are the top two, followed by take initiatives on infrastructure, what I just told you about the hosting and so on. On the quality issue, alternative reputation system, which is actually a way of incentivizing and so on. So these are the key issues that came out of the consultation. Specifically, because of the meeting of today, I put this slide on if you look at what stakeholders told us with recommendations with regard to the skills. Well, we must provide and support training on digital skills, encourage skills for open science and training, so you're on the right track with this workshop, and with Foster, and integrate open science in standard research training, which is probably the way it will go in the future. I cannot imagine that in 5 years' time all doctoral programs in Europe should not have a kind of a standard model on open science, publication, data hosting, sharing, etc. It is the way forward. So anyway, this come out of what some of the key players told us. So then we did what you would call a very bureaucratic process, but anyway, we did a big validation, we filtered it, we had discussions with all the stakeholders, and then we came up with 3 key actions for the future. So this is now what we are working on in my unit and my team, what we are working on for the coming X months to kick off and X years to follow and to set up. So we decided, as a result of all this, that we will take initiative to set up or to support something, and I come back to that in a second, with regard to the big data, the data-driven infrastructure needs and the governance. We would do something on the incentives, improving the framework conditions for fostering open science, that's how we call it. And we will develop actions on making it much more real-life operational, so making science more efficient, reliable, and so on. So in other words, to introduce it in the funding mechanisms. And I come back to that in a second. If I'm not taking too much time, Alexis, tell me if I have to go if I have to go fast forward. And here, so So these were the conclusions of a year of consultation and discussions, and this is what I think is very important for everyone who is working in the policy field, is that whatever we would do, it has to be bottom up, and it has to be stakeholder driven. That came back recurrently all the time. Don't take an initiative which is not supported by your communities and which is not stakeholder driven. It's essential. So to put it the other way around, don't make the mistake to come up with top down Brussels decide type of solutions, because it will not work. That came back over and over and over again. And I think if someone who knows the specificities of the research world as subsidiarity, it's quite logical. So. For the moment, where are we? So we have put the issue now, it's on the top level policy agenda. At the end of the month, there will be the ministerial conference in Latvia discussing our results. So what I just presented to you, but then a bit longer. So which is in Brussels speak about the highest level you can get with your initiatives. It will then, the 22nd of June, there will be a big conference where we will launch the official results, so the things I just showed you, and where we will launch the open science agenda on the 3 topics. The action agenda, the commissioner will launch it, Moedas, on the 3 topics. And what kind of actions are we, for the moment, discussing? First of all, with regard to the incentives and taking away the barriers, so we would like to create a stakeholder forum at European level, where in a self-regulatory way, the issues related to open science and all the issues are being taken on board, and where recommendations can be issued. So not a directive, not a white paper, not a green paper, but the stakeholder forum saying that, okay, let's take quality. If quality in that is an issue, well, we recommend the stakeholders to do this. So that's the first thing. And that of course fits what I just said, it should be bottom up and stakeholder driven. And we would like to propose a European code of conduct setting out the general principles and requirements of how open science should affect the roles, responsibilities and entitlements of researchers and their employers. That will not be so easy to do, because you will need the whole community to subscribe to it. But for example, if we want open science to be part of an incentive for your career, the only way to do that is to make sure that universities take it serious, or your institutions. If data sharing becomes part of the gratification for your scientific activity, only universities can do it, and that will foster more development. So that's why we do this thing. Secondly, still on the incentives and the barriers. So we will continue pushing for open access to publications, which is already the case, and open access to data, which is only in a pilot form now, with the money what we control, so the framework program, and issue the guidelines under that in that respect. We are at the level of the infrastructures. What we are seriously discussing now, and this is taking a kind of a propelling effect, is that the European Commission should facilitate what we call a European Open Science Cloud for Data. So that at the level of hosting, access and governance, we create a federated structure, so not a top-down structure, but a federated structure and a federated approach and a federated governance to make sure that open data is not only scattered around in different repositories which are not interoperable, but that it can really become a kind of a collective resource which is collectively managed in some form or another. Now, this is a huge thing. I can speak hours on this because it's complicated. There's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of stakeholders, a lot of variable geometry. In physics, the situation of data-drivenness is completely different as in economics, just to give you 2 examples. But this is getting a quite significant support. So we would like to make sure that we have this support facility and governance at European level as soon as possible, because we think that this is the key bottleneck at the infrastructure level for Europe. Do you have an estimate in your own mind when this as soon as possible Well,
You won't be held accountable, but just in your own mind, what would you like to see?
well, character-wise, yesterday, but in I think it can go quite fast. So we will probably announce it the 22nd of June. We are setting up an expert group of data scientists to help us fine-tuning the recommendations. We have foreseen, not the recommendations, the specificities, the parameters. And that's where this lady from Graz, where I was talking to someone there before, is coming in. So we have foreseen, but this is subjunctive, hein? This is French subjunctive, so if. So we have foreseen a significant amount of money for a pilot in 16, 17. So it is slowly getting into place, but the key bottleneck will be if we can come up with a governance structure where the stakeholders will support. If, as you can imagine, I mean, you have all the existing repositories, small players and then enormous players like CERN. As you can imagine, there are a lot of people working on this, and bringing them together and making them agree is not so easy. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we need to be sure where do we put the money, because I personally think that hosting is not the key issue. I don't think cloud is a commodity. So the issue is not the hosting, the issue is the accessibility, interoperability, the services on the data, and then the governance. Because imagine you have a European open science cloud. Imagine you want to combine transport data with health data. You have immediately problems with all kind of regulations on how to do that. And the cloud, the research cloud could be a way to bypass the existing regulations or to sidestep it. But then you must also make sure that if that is the case and the research is over, that the data are not ad vita or ad infinitum there to be used for something else. So it is not so easy to do. It is conceptually relatively easy. So we have a problem at 3 levels: access, hosting, access, governance. So we create a structure which allows an exception, which is a European research cloud. But then to make it a reality, that is not so easy. So I think we should be able, I personally think we should be able to have something very serious at the end of next year. Because if we wait too long, and this is not exactly to be reproduced, if we wait too long, I'm quite sure that significant parts of the European research ecosystem will put their data outside Europe just to bypass the problems. And then it's over, the cloud. If we lose the totality, if we lose significant players, I'm not going to mention, maybe over lunch I will tell you whom I'm thinking here. If we lose significant players, and then we have a serious problem. It will only work if the whole of Europe, well, it's only attractive if the whole of Europe is there. If only bits and pieces are there, what's the point? And you can, and the issue is not the hosting. You can quite cheaply buy cloud services globally. The issue is all the rest. Thank you.
Maybe in the next framework or something distant future.
No, no, but listen, I personally think, but again, this is not a policy answer, but I personally think all these issues, the momentum is now and in the 2 or 3 years to come. And if we don't get our act together in Europe in that window, then it's too late. And there are examples of the past that if you, and that is an argument I use a lot. So at the end of the 90s, beginning of 2000 was the momentum to go for Web 2. We had the technologies, we had Fraunhofer, etc., who had the lead technologies. We hesitated policy-wise, and then what is the result? All big Web 2 companies are now are not European. It's as simple as that. If you take the top 20 companies, there's one European company which exists already 40 years, SAP, and all the rest is gone or not there. Why? Because we hesitated. You know, there are moments where you have to jump, but that's of course, if you think policy, this is of course the difficulty that I face I'm not complaining, I'm just illustrating. So the difficulty is that it's evolving, it's unfolding, and no one, except if there is a brilliant guy here, no one can really say where will it go. If you're intellectually honest, we see the tendency, but we don't see the full picture because it simply is unfolding, and that is not so easy. I mean, if you have to say to policymakers, well, take the risk, jump in the water, this is not what they really like. Anyway, so I think it is 2 or 3, all these things, the code of conduct, the cloud and so on, it's in the next 2 to 3 years. So it's under discussion. I'm almost finished, Alexis. So it's under this. Yeah, he's getting nervous. He's getting. Contrary to the French culture, he's very strict, but so you have to be too long in Norwegia. So this is something. Did I miss something? So we also. We are foreseeing action on the cloud, foreseeing action on training. We foresaw a budget line for a follow-up of Foster. Just a tip for you. It's all not formally yet adopted, but it will most likely come so. I can give you details later on if you want. We are foreseeing action on the incentives, and then we will of course try to make open access policies even more prevalent as they are now. And then we will also foresee a pilot phase for demonstrating a full open science cycle. So this is what is written here. So in the next work program of Horizon 2020, there will be a call for do a research project where the whole cycle is open. The topic, I forgot the topic, so we listed 3 topics, you can choose them, but it's not about it's not a project about the meta effects, it's a project about, okay, we will challenge clean batteries, that's our project. Well, the whole research cycle should be open and show us how it will work in reality and what the ramifications are. It's a small project, but it is important for the future. So all this is common. As you know, and as the people from YEAR know, we value enormously what you think and have to say on that. These are a few questions if you don't know what to do tonight on the island to think about. But actually, you mentioned them in your introduction, so it is living. And thank you very much. That's the announcement of the conference. I think some of you will be invited 22nd of June. Some of your bosses will certainly be invited, but please contribute. And if there are questions, I'm more than happy to try to answer them.